Hey folks, welcome back for another build video where we are revisiting everyone's favorite submachine gun, the Backfire. Which of course sports the oft-hated payment in kind, dealing damage to enemies adds a stack of 1% critical hit damage up to 200 stacks lasting 10 seconds. On reload it applies a 10-second bleed to yourself, which deals 0.5% armor damage per stack. So as anyone who has used this weapon will know, you can get an absolutely awesome amount of critical hit damage, and you can also apply an absolutely devastating amount of bleed to yourself, in fact enough to down yourself if you're not careful. Or alternatively, you can put on a 100% hazard protection build, which is the route we've gone with this time. So as many of you will have already clocked, down here we have the Ninja Bike Messenger backpack, which has its own relationship. Some people really hate it, some people love it. I personally really kind of love it because it opens up so many different builds you can put together, even if they may not be the most powerful thing in the world. I just find the uniqueness of it really intriguing. That being said, one of the reasons that I think people really don't like it is because there aren't a ton of 1- and 2-piece bonuses that synergize really well together in this game. In particular, if we dance down here to s.r.o, the 1- and 2-piece bonuses are honestly really kind of strange. You get critical hit chance with your first brand bonus and hazard protection with your second brand bonus. Who is that even for? Well, in one specific case, it actually works really well together, and that is with the Backfire submachine gun, where obviously the critical hit chance is really nice to have because you're going to get that 200 stacks of critical hit damage to use, and that 10% hazard protection gets you 10% on your way to 100%, which is what you need if you want to be immune to the bleed that you're going to be applying to yourself every time you reload. So even though I've already rambled well over a minute on this, and I'm honestly excited to present this one to you, I do want to make a disclaimer that I'm honestly in a very weird place with this build. It was a surprising amount of fun to run around with, but I will fully recognize that it isn't the max damage build that I think we all want it to be, because in theory 200 stacks of critical hit damage sounds awesome and it should feel awesome, and while it does feel really cool, with the amount of hazard protection that you have to stack on this build to make it usable, i.e. not killing yourself every time you reload, you have to give up a significant amount of damage as well. So the way that I am treating this build and the niche that it kind of fills is almost as a consequence of having 100% hazard protection. It makes you immune to all status effects. That's really kind of cool to run around with. Namely, you don't have to worry about any of the cleaner effects. All of that ignite damage is completely immune. The special ammo directive is just entirely fun to run around because nothing can hurt you. And so for me, as I start to ramble again, that is the corner that this build lives on for me. It is not the awesome damage dealer that we want it to be. It's not going to outperform a number of other DPS builds, but because you've put 100% hazard protection on this build and you do have all of that critical hit damage working for you once you build it up, it is really fun to be able to run around and be immune to status effects and apply a significant amount of damage to your enemies, as you'll see in the video later. So with that out of the way, let's get into this one. For the specialization, we've gone with Firewall. That is really mainly because this is an up close and personal build. The Backfire is a submachine gun. It is meant to be engaged from close quarters. On top of that, the extracellular matrix mesh is a great talent to have. The armor kits now recover 200% armor and 200% health over 10 seconds. The Firewall ballistic shield down there helps increase the damage that you're dealing, so it makes up for some of the armor cores that we have on our build down there. And then last but not least, the fiery response is actually a talent I find myself making use of more than I would have thought on this build. So on armor break, you apply burn to all enemies within 5 meters. Even in the short clip later on, you'll see that comes in handy a decent amount of the time because you're so close to your enemies. You can use that armor break to buy yourself a little time to either duck back in cover and apply an armor kit, or to just press your advantage and take the enemy down while they've been randomly ignited because your armor is broken. For primary weapon, we have the Backfire. I've already talked at length. I won't go through the talent again, other than to say that it is crucial to note that at 10 seconds, if you haven't applied any damage to an enemy within 10 seconds, all 200 of your stacks will disappear, which is a really unfortunate byproduct of this talent. It doesn't decay like some other stacks do, like the Capacitor or the Merciless. They all go away at once. That is an unfortunate thing, so if you don't get any damage dealt within 10 seconds, you will have to build those back up from zero. But otherwise, maintaining those stacks or building them in an encounter is typically not that hard to do, as long as you have enemies to fire at. So pretty big caveat there, but as long as you do have enemies, it is pretty easy to keep these active, because again, you do have that 10-second grace period before they all disappear. For a secondary weapon, you can go a number of different ways, but because we are going to be close and personal, pun intended, I've gone with the M870 variant shotgun. It deals a significant amount of damage, and it's a great weapon to be able to turn to. On top of that, we've rolled close and personal here. Killing a target within 7 meters grants an additional 30% weapon damage for 10 seconds. So if you can pair those at the beginning of an encounter, it's really nice. Otherwise, I wouldn't recommend switching away from your Backfire on this build, because switching weapons does also reset your stacks for the Backfire. So both your secondary weapon and the sidearm coming up are really meant more for the extraneous case where you need to make use of them for some other reason. For our sidearm, we've gone with the TDI card custom, because why not? But less flippantly, the +1 skill tier is really nice to have for various skills. Not particularly the two we have down there, but if you run in that first skill slot, you can run a number of different things, including the decoy or the reviver hive if you want to. The reviver hive in particular benefits if you're running in a group, because you can swap to your pistol, gain an extra hive to drop down, and then pick that back up without having to completely deplete your hive just to get one of your allies up. For a mask, we've gone with the Hollow Man, which is a Dark Zone exclusive. It is unfortunate there is no other way to get this other than named caches, and now you can get the blueprint. If you don't have the Hollow Man, a normal Y'all mask will work as well, but honestly, with Y'all gear being Dark Zone exclusive as well, it's not that much easier to find a normal Y'all gear piece over the Hollow Man, but I do want to make that note, you could go that route instead. But the significant benefit of going with the Hollow Man is it comes with the unique plus 10% health damage attribute, which, because we're not running with an assault rifle that has that natively, it is a great way to apply some additional damage to our targets. On top of that, we have the standard armor core that it comes with, and then we've rerolled hazard protection in that secondary attribute slot, and then we have critical hit chance in our mod slot. For backpack, we have the aforementioned Ninja Bike Messenger backpack. It comes with those 3 cores, weapon damage, armor, and a skill tier. And then again, there in the mod slot, we have critical hit chance. And then of course it comes with the Resourceful Talent, which slots in with any equipped gear set and or brand set item to fulfill a requirement towards unlocking a brand set bonus. And it can and does unlock bonuses from multiple sets simultaneously. So for instance, with the Y'all gear, even though we only have the Hollow Man, one piece of Y'all, we get both the plus 10% hazard protection bonus and an additional plus 5% weapon damage, which helps make up a little bit for the fact we've gone with an armor core here instead of a weapon core, giving us a little bit more survivability and building into our shield tiers. For a chest piece, we have one piece of s.r.o that we've gone into already a little bit beforehand. Its first brand bonus is plus 10% critical hit chance, which is powerful on really any DPS build. And then our second one, we have plus 10% hazard protection, which is critical for getting us to that 100% hazard protection that we're aiming for. For attributes, we have a core of weapon damage, hazard protection in the first slot, critical hit chance in the secondary slot, and then in this case we've gone with critical hit damage in the mod slot because we are near our 60% critical hit chance cap. So instead of wasting that in critical hit chance, we've gone with critical hit damage. But as with any DPS build, your mileage may vary based on your particular roles. So make sure to do your own math with the simple equation that will flash up on screen so that you can make sure you're getting the maximum amount of critical hit damage from your build. Though do keep in mind that because of the Backfire's unique talent, you're going to be getting plus 200% critical hit damage at max. So it really does benefit you to just build into critical hit chance until you basically hit that cap. I would try and get within 1% or 2% of 60, and then you should be good to go with critical hit damage in any of the other slots. For the talent here, we've gone with Obliterate. Critical hits increase total weapon damage by 1% for 10 seconds, which stacks up to 25 times. This is a staple on a number of DPS builds, but it pairs really well with both the Backfire and this 100% hazard protection build in particular, because it helps make up for some of the weapon damage that you've lost on other pieces of gear, and it also builds in a similar way to the payment in kind talent, so you're going to just be generally building damage as you continue to fire and hit the target. Obviously, the obliterate stacks increase as you get critical hits, and the payment in kind stacks will increase as you just get general hits. For gloves, we've gone with the Death Grips, which is our first of 2 pieces of 511 Tactical. This piece gives us plus 30% health and plus 20% incoming repairs. Neither of those are particularly beneficial, but what we do get from the Death Grips is that plus 10% armor on kill, unique secondary attribute, and then we can reroll hazard protection there in the second secondary attribute slot. On top of that, we have the native core attribute of armor. If you don't have the Death Grips, or even if you do, I want to highlight a variation for this build that you could go with. If you don't want to go with 511 Tactical, because those first 2 bonuses aren't particularly great, especially if you're not running in a group, if you're running solo, or if you just don't have the Death Grips, or you just want to go a different route, you could go with Uzina Getica instead of 511. The brand bonuses there are 5% total armor, 10% armor on kill, and then the same plus 20% hazard protection, which is really the critical bonus that we're going for this build in particular. So again, if you don't have Death Grips, or you're not running in a group where you could potentially benefit from that plus 20% incoming repairs, I would recommend taking a look at a variation for this build, which is again going with Uzina Getica instead of 511 in both the glove and holster slot, as you'll see in a second. And that way you can get some additional armor and build a little more into that critical hit damage stat that we were talking about on their chest piece. For our holster, we have our second and final piece of 511 Tactical, unlocking that plus 20% hazard protection bonus. On top of that, we have critical damage and hazard protection again in the secondary attribute slot, and then we've kept that natural core attribute of armor, giving us a little bit more defensibility and also increasing our shield tiers. And then here for our knees, we have Fox's Prayers. It is the named Overlord armaments, giving us plus 10% rifle damage that we're not using, but we are going to use that plus 30% accuracy, which feels really nice and helps increase the effective range of the Backfire. But really, we've included this piece because of that unique secondary attribute, plus 8% damage to target out of cover. And then again, in that second secondary attribute slot, we have plus 10% hazard protection, which when you include the 10% what we're getting from our completely upgraded watch, gets us to 100% hazard protection. So before we go into our skills, I want to address that a little bit. So hazard protection in this game is basically a roll-up attribute, not dissimilar to weapon handling or skill efficiency, which we've touched on previously in the channel, where weapon handling is a combination of stability, accuracy, reload speed, and weapon swap speed, where 1% weapon handling gives you 1% of each of the things I've listed. Hazard protection includes blind resistance, shock resistance, bleed resistance, burn resistance, disorient resistance, disrupt resistance, ensnare resistance, and poison resistance, where 1% of hazard protection gives you 1% of each of those resistances that I've listed. So while we have had to give up quite a bit of weapon damage to get here, the trade-off is that we have immunity to every status effect in this game. Obviously, you can still take damage from normal stuff like weapon fire, and you can still take damage from explosives, but otherwise, you have effectively a 100% status effect resistant build, and you're also able to do a significant amount of damage because of the way the payment in kind talent works. For our skills, we've gone with Riot Foam and the Striker Ballistic Shield, specifically the Firewall variant of that shield. We've gone with Riot Foam here because it's a great way to stun lock your enemies, and specifically talking about hunters here. This is another place where this build actually works surprisingly well. I think one of the main threats of the hunters, other than the fact that they hit like an absolute truck, is the fact that they can disrupt all of your skills and make them completely ineffective for almost the duration of a hunter fight, unless you can stun lock them quickly or outlast them long enough for that effect to expire. But with this build, you don't have to worry about that. You can have your Riot Foam and your shield ready for use during a hunter encounter because you are immune to their disrupt status effect. But on top of that, even if you're not going for hunters, Riot Foam is just a great way to stun lock your enemies, buy yourself a second if you need to apply an armor kit or finish an enemy, and get that armor on kill from your gloves. Other talent options that do work well here are the Jammer Pulse is surprisingly effective given the fact that you don't have to worry about status effects. You're mainly focused on things like the suicide drones from Black Tusk, as well as the fact that the Jammer Pulse stuns lower level enemies. And then additionally, the Reviver Hive is really nice to be able to have if you want to run in a group or if you want to just run on the edge of things and you're more likely to be downed. Obviously, having the Reviver Hive there to get yourself back up is extremely beneficial. For second skill here, we have the Firewall variant of the Striker Ballistic Shield. As it says in that third paragraph here, your shield tiers are based on the number of armor and skill tiers that you have on the build. So in this case, we have 5 combined, 4 armor and 1 skill tier. So we get to run with a tier 5 shield here. On top of that, because it's the firewall specific variant, you do get a 12% damage bonus per enemy within the cone of effective range. You'll see what that is later in the video. So for enemies within that cone, you get a 12% damage bonus, which is a significant benefit on a build like this where you've had to sacrifice some weapon damage for some survivability. You can get a lot of that back if you can get up close and personal with your enemies. On top of that, the tier 5 shield comes with 50% active regeneration, plus 200% health, plus 25% holstered regeneration, and plus 1.8% buff strength. So there you go, another Backfire 100% HazPro build. I know this, again, isn't really breaking the mold, but I do think it is a fun way to make use of the Backfire and mitigate the downside of the payment in kind talent. On top of that, it is a fun change of pace, and if you're ever in a situation where you find yourself needing a 100% hazard protection build, the Backfire is a great weapon to pair with that, because then it mitigates the entire downside of the payment in kind talent, and all you have left is that fantastic upside of 200 stacks of critical hit damage to focus on your enemies, take them down, and clear the field effectively. So put this one together, try it out, let me know in the comments what you think of it. Obviously, I know the Backfire and the Ninja Bike Messenger backpack have their fans and their detractors. I'd love to hear what your guys' thoughts are specifically on this build and how you think it pairs together. As always, like this video if you liked it, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this, and please tell your friends about the channel so you can continue to help us grow and make stuff like this. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.
Incoming hostiles detected. Vital signs. Detecting additional hostile contacts. Incoming hostiles detected. Immediate medical assistance needed. Detecting additional hostile contacts. Serious trauma detected. Immediate medical assistance needed.